How's it?
How's it, Steven? How are you?
I've been waiting so long, I started fiddling with the settings.
Yeah, because now you upside down for
Yeah,
me.
but I'm in Australia, mate.
But
Let me just...
so,
There we go.
there we go.
How's it
That's
going?
hilarious. So I just wanted to test. I've decided to use my AirPods because I'm actually in the hotel lobby. So can you hear me all right?
Oh, yeah. No, you're great, mate. Good
Yeah.
quality.
Yes. Say, look at that. There are no connection interruptions.
Yes. Well, mate, listen, I must say I am buzzing. You just started making a name for yourself, like, I don't know, it was 4, 5, 6 years ago. I was still in the UK. And then
Okay.
my wife's like, oh, look at this video. This guy's so funny. And before I know it, you're everywhere, mate. Well, we all know you as the Minister of Entertainment.
This year at least.
How about you do a proper introduction?
Exactly. Well, thanks, Stephen. I mean, I am Kevin Fraser, and I entered this comedy game, like you say, about 4 or 5 years ago on stage. But in terms of content online, that was as early as 2015, and that's where it all began. Just videos from life in Australia. I decided to come over and give it a bit of a test, see some family, travel, learn, work, see what Oorsee is all about,
You're currently in New Zealand, right?
Yeah, I'm currently in New Zealand and I got here yesterday. So tonight we start the tour here in Auckland. We have a slot show. And then tomorrow and Saturday following in Christchurch in Wellington. So really excited to be here, and that kicks off my Down Under tour. Yeah,
I've pulled up a couple of questions for you. This is a thing we do. We've got immigration stories, and then we've got just like general traveling chat and those sort of things. And since you are in the neighborhood, I figured you're the best person to interview.
Awesome.
Mate, question number 1. How has your experience as a South African comedian influenced your comedy style and material since you started traveling Australia?
Absolutely. Well, I think that, coming from a country where we have such a diverse background and so many different cultures, you don't realize how that can play out in your everyday being, your personality, what you've come to learn and know. And so I try and just unveil all of that in the content I do overseas. And I think that it's a chance to further spread the message of not just my country, but my continent and the expressions that we live with every day. So I think it's very evident when you come to shows that I do, especially abroad, that I'm proudly South African, and I'm trying to voice this message of what Africa is. And it's really just a feeling. And that's what I believe.
Mate, I must say, we've moved out of the country in 2015, and there is those little things that you miss, just those tiny little things. I mean, we went for a quick holiday back in 2017. We were still in London. We flew down to Cape Town, and one of the first things I heard was someone telling someone else, "Jay, talopai saka," and I was like, you know what? I'm home. Listening to your videos as you impersonate some of those dialects and the way people speak, oh mate, it stirs something deep in my soul, and just a daily reminder. You know what? We're South African. We should be proud of it. Doesn't matter where we live. Right.
Exactly. We can never finish a sentence without having a little bit of a back chat after that. We've always got something to add.
Absolutely, mate. Question number 2. Are there any notable differences between the comedy scenes in South Africa and Australia? Now, the reason I'm asking this is because you've traveled quite a bit. I mean, you've stayed in places for some time, and obviously you pick up on the lingo in New Zealand, in Australia, even in the UK. How does those scenes differ from say, for instance, South Africa?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think certainly in terms of like everyday jargon, there's some very subtle differences and some very clear differences. One of those, for example, in my second year down under, I was actually studying in Melbourne, and I went to Swinburne University. I studied out there, and I remember coming home the one day, and I was hanging with my sister-in-law, and I don't know if it's a Tasmanian thing because I have a whole lot of family that's in Tasmania, and we'd always bounce between Melbourne and Hobart, and I can remember coming back the one day, and then my sister-in-law had said, what do you want for tea? And I was like, well, 5 roses, I want 5 roses, and turned out tea was dinner, and I was so confused. And she said, no, I better boil the kettle, and there was all this confusion in the jargon, and I realized that I've got to get onto it pretty quickly and learn what subtle word differences there are that I can actually use in my everyday compared to South Africa. I mean, a toilet in Australia is called a dunny. I mean, have you ever, but in terms of like actual comedy itself and our sense of humor, there's definitely a difference when it comes to like sarcasm, and I find that some stuff just goes over people's heads, so you really have to be clear when you're like kind of going down the sarcastic alley. That's handed me my ass a few times.
I've learned because we've got at work we've got this ritual. We take lunch together, so every day at 1 we all go sit around this round table and we just have a good laugh and chat. One thing that I admire from the Australians is they don't take anything seriously. I mean, 2/3 of the country was on fire. It was very sad. But somewhere, some guy started saying something about it, which is funny. And I looked up and I'm like, well, it's a tragedy. Why are you guys laughing about it? And they're like, no. That's how we deal with it. And then I realized, hold on, that's familiar. That's how we deal with things.
That's familiar.
And I mean, the disasters and the stuff that happens to us in South Africa is much more personal than it is, for instance, bushfire or even a global pandemic, really. And we tend to make jokes of it and say, you know what? This is Africa. This is how it makes us stronger. We look ahead, we look forward, and we just go continue on upward.
Just another day, And I think that it's so true, because I was explaining the load shedding concept to a room of Australians the other day. I was sitting in a meeting and they didn't understand or have heard of this load shedding thing. So I explained the whole power crisis in South Africa, and the comment I got from the one, I was just like, oh mate, but like, you seriously have no power for that? Like, how do you watch the footy? And I was like, is that your first concern? Like, what are we having for dinner now? Whatever's defrosting, that's more our concern. So yeah, it's just like you say, you have to laugh it off and find a way to deal with it.
Yeah, no, and I think we can all maybe learn a bit from each other, definitely in that regard. Right, thank you so much. Thanks for that. That's great. I'm going to jump to question number 3. And we might have touched on this already. I'm an amateur YouTuber. I do this for fun. It's loads of fun. And I often I'll ask a question, and the person I'm interviewing will answer the coming question as well. So forgive me if that's the case. As a comedian who has lived in both countries, what unique perspectives and observations do you bring to comedy that resonates with audiences from both South Africa and Australia? Now, we've touched on that a tiny bit. Is there because at work, for instance, there's a lot of Australians here that listens to South African comedy as well. They've quite often I'll get the guy come to my office and say, hey, did you see that this guy did this weekend? Oh, it was so funny. Did you find a common ground between the two cultures?
Well, I think so, because I mean, before I started gallivanting around the world and doing this, I was like, what is this place going to be like? What is the UK going to give me? What is Canada going to give me? What's Australia going to? And you realize very quickly once you travel to all these regions that, we're all just human, and we have the exact same needs and wants in our lives, just relative to our environment. And one of those things, for example, is we're all experiencing the rising cost of living and inflation and supermarkets and stuff. So you can find a common denominator like that to talk about, and then just try to to have a bit of real experience in that place before I'm able to deliver on it, so that I can maybe touch on both sides of the fence, or set up a joke with a bit of a reference behind it. If perhaps, Australia didn't understand some of the nuances from South Africa, just give a bit of background and explain it first before trying to set up the joke. And I also just think be real and tell it off with your spin.
I can see, I can see you love South Africa, and you love the people, you love your culture. I mean, is it the main fire behind you doing what you're doing?
I think so. I think I've often said in shows, the drum was invented in Africa. It all started there, and it's a feeling that you walk with, and there's a huge spotlight on it at the moment around the world, especially through music. And where we can't understand each other's language, we can dance it off. That's something I bring a lot into my content that people see, is dance and feeling. It just reinforces the rhythm of our continent. And I think that it is. I mean, we often see stuff and the spotlight focus on other countries and other things, and it's, I want to be that light that helps shine, the spotlight onto our country. But I mean, it's just about being real with people, and I think I'll never let that voice go, because that's who I am. It's helped made me who I am.
No, mate, we appreciate you. I've not met one South African abroad that does not love your work and love what you're doing. I'm a big fan of any attempt any South African does to live or think outside of the box for his culture and for his tradition. It's not, if we could, we would bring the whole land with us. We'll bring all the animals, get the elephant in the plane with us and all of that, but we can't. We have as our experiences, our history, and the things that our parents taught us. And it's important, especially for me, and that's one of the main reasons why I started Oorsee, the app, is to keep some of those traditions going. Right, thank you so much for that. I'm gonna jump to question number 4, and then I've got something special planned at the end, which I think it can either make us or destroy us. We'll see. So you're currently in New Zealand. You're doing your tour, Minister of Entertainment. You're good title, by the way. And then after that, you're heading over to Australia, and I'll be seeing you on, is it the 3rd of June in Melbourne?
Yes.
What is next? What other countries are in your scope, and what can your fans expect?
Sure. So as soon as we finish up with Australia, which will be middle of July, we'll have a small break, and then I go on to the European summer. So pretty excited about that. We'll be doing a couple of new spots, and then a return on a couple of others, such as Lisbon, Portugal, Limassol in Cyprus, Athens, Berlin, Amsterdam, Zurich. We're even coming out to Asia, doing Hong Kong, Bangkok, and Singapore. So there's some fresh spots there, and that'll see me through to September. And then Australia will be getting an awesome regional tour in October, more towards October, just for places in regional Australia. I have to split the tour because this country's so big.
It's enormous. I mean, we just took a casual drive the other day. 6 hours later, we were still in Victoria. It's one of our main on our bucket list. It's just to do a round tour, but it's crazy, especially with 3 kids. I mean, I struggle taking them down to the supermarket. I mean, can you imagine doing something up to Brisbane?
Imagine.
Mate, thank you so much. Now, in the hype of everything AI, right? So we've got one more question left. I know you're on the go. You're busy. You need to prepare for tonight. So I thought, as a last question, let's see what ChatGPT is going to come up. I know it's a chance. But if you're game, let's take a look. I mean, we can always cut it out if we don't agree. So what I've learned from ChatGPT is you need to be very specific. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Open AI. I've only ever played around with this once before. ChatGPT.
Yeah. So let's say, give me a question I can ask let's go with comedian.
Okay.
That's your day job, right?
Yeah. Apparently.
Give me a question I can ask a comedian that is South African, but
Okay.
busy traveling
Okay.
New Zealand. Right.
That's very specific.
Yeah, well, we can even, ChatGPT is great, man. I work in IT, you know this, right? So I can really break it down. I can even mention your earpods you got in, everything. This thing would make something out of it. But let's have a look. What has been the biggest culture shock or funniest experience you've encountered while performing comedy in New Zealand as a South African comedian? How's that?
Okay, well, yeah, okay, that's pretty good. What is the biggest culture shock or funniest experience? You see, a culture shock for sure, but the first thing that came to mind actually was yesterday. Is like people love their ink here. Ink is such a big thing in New Zealand, and it can go anywhere. And I think there are some cultural aspects that come into play there for the different groups that are here, but definitely, like, people are inked up. I've seen people fully colored in, tattoos, ink. It is inked up. I mean, I've got a sleeve of tattoos, and I got like a little bit influence in Australia, and I went for full sleeve, much to my mother's dismay. And then but this is an understatement for what exists down here.
I've seen that in Australia as well. I mean, I've worked with people that is they suit and tied up, right? Really proper. Ooh, you look, it's really netjies persoon. And then it comes to civvy day at work, and he rocks up here in a tank top, and I'm like, what just happened? And then a couple of earrings in there as well. Anyway,
and I suppose that coinciding with one of the funniest experiences that we so used to having hazards and potholes in South Africa, but when there's a pothole here, I cannot count the amount of orange cones that will be located around any hazard here. So much to say that the orange cones now become the hazard and no longer the hazard.
Thank you so much for giving me some of your time for this interview. It's been great. I really appreciate it, and I look forward in seeing you next week.
Absolutely. We'll see you then in Melbourne. I'll bring my jacket.